right. Well, welcome. I'm Maggie. For some reason I can't change my name on my Zoom account right now. I don't know what's going on, but I wanted to introduce you to Dr. Yohai Eisenberg, who some of you may have met at the if you were at the first training with Kiana, but he's here today to um, talk through validation, talk through some examples of um, how communities have mapped their data and used it for advocacy. And then we're here to, you know, if you just want to use this time to map, you can map your own community. And if you have questions, we can, feel free to, ask away. So we'll use that time for all of those things. So, Yohai, do you want to I guess we can maybe start with
Yeah,
uh,
the
some of
PowerPoint.
the that presentation and
Yeah,
some of the info that you
definitely.
have.
Sounds good. And obviously, there's a small group, so it can be very informal. People could ask questions and yeah. Oh, and I see one already. Dolores, see your hand up.
Hi. I just wanted to be clear on what type of equipment we'll be using. Is it only for tablets? Will we be able to use those smartphones?
So,
Um,
you need a tablet or a laptop or desktop computer to do the auditing, go through the what we call the exploration missions. You can do the validations, which we'll teach you about tonight, on your smartphone. So I guess a little bit of
okay.
both. Partly it's a space issue in that, when you're using Google Street View, it's a pretty big screen and there's a lot to look at. So it's hard, I think, for our developers to put that onto a smartphone.
Yohai, at the last call, some people were using a tablet and they were mentioning they were having some trouble like clicking the OK button after they marked up
Oh yeah.
a space. And then Kiana said if you use she tried it out with a tablet and she used a mouse attachment and she was able to
Okay.
make it work then. I don't know if you've heard about that issue for people
I
using.
haven't. No, I could talk with her about it though, and maybe we could kind of put together a help document.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
think there were at least a couple people last time that were using a tablet.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. I wanted to do a quick little shout out. Quincy Keith has joined the room.
Oh, hi,
He
Quincy.
is a part of the Dream Team, which is us right here in Chicago. But Quincy is located in Columbus, Ohio, which is super awesome because he has Ohio State. And when I checked out the region, I was like, oh my gosh, they totally like did everything. So hopefully we can find some like mapping for Quincy to do, which can either be still in his neighborhood of Columbus, because he stays in a neighborhood called Whitehall, if I'm not mistaken. And then he can interchangeably help us out with South Shore mapping too, because he used to stay in Chicago. Fun fact.
Well, welcome, Quincy.
Great. Yeah, welcome, Quincy. Definitely. Yeah, we have some different groups I know in Ohio that are um, pretty active. So yeah, fun to have folks from all over. Great. Why don't I start sharing and hopefully that'll inspire some additional questions as we're going along here. Um,
I just made you a co-host.
okay, that's it. Yep,
Yeah.
great. And you guys are seeing the screen here.
Yes.
Great. So we introduced ourselves already. Um, so we'll go through, see about any questions you guys had on the initial training, talk through validations, data visualizations, and other community examples that we can walk through to kind of show, what do you do with all this data? So I guess we head in here, I guess we kind of informally talked a little bit about some of your questions, but thought we could also pause and just see, what questions or concerns do you have since our initial training? And you could feel free to unmute or um, you could
I
ask a question in the chat.
I thank you for that. My question just lies around labeling.
Uh-huh.
I am very thorough about most things that I do in life. So when I get to the intersections, I'm labeling every curb ramp that I see, and then I also label every crosswalk that I see that connects to those curb ramps. I wanted
Right.
to know if that was the correct way to label.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So it's one of these things that's kind of like you know, when you're going down the street, you can kind of move pretty quickly, but the intersections do take probably the majority of your time in labeling because, as you were saying, there's curb ramps usually, right? Or missing curb ramps if there's not a curb ramp, or there's broken curb ramps that we want to label those. And then there's the crosswalks, exactly. And then the other piece that you might see that you might label there too is pedestrian signals. So that's another label we have is pedestrian signals where you can note um, if the signals have important features, including an audible push button, which we have some pictures for if you kind of hover over that label um, and those tags. And so yeah, intersections definitely do take a while. And there's some nuances sometimes with intersections, but especially signalized intersections will likely take you the longest time. Um, but good to hear that you're being thorough and we've been trying, our team has been trying to do validations for all the communities. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about what those are in a little bit.
Thank
And
you. I
yeah, you're
really
welcome.
appreciate that. Yeah. I'm sorry to throw you in here, Quincy, but I know that you're like super fresh on this project. So if you have any questions, please ask them. I believe I have some of the stuff that we talked about in my notes, but if you have anything, please feel free to speak up.
Yes, definitely. And great to have some of your, firsthand experience as well. The tool has, very kind of defined categories of things, but often there's places for comments. So, as you have things that you want to share about your lived experience, you can do that in the comments as well. And okay, I see William shared. I already did the second training, so I am just listening. Great. Okay. Nice to have you, William. Thanks. And welcome, Rashida.
Hello,
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great. All right. Any other questions? We're just going over kind of questions or concerns that people had since the initial training. Does everyone want to share, I guess, about which community you're working on? Damien, I think you shared, I guess, South Shore. Is that right?
Yeah, since I'm running my mouth already.
Yeah.
I am doing the awesome South Shore neighborhood, which is
Awesome.
the opposite of North Shore. And we are a lakefront community. I'm actually a lakefront resident. I live literally on the lake. The lake is my backyard. I am enjoying seeing my neighborhood from the Google Maps viewpoint and geotagging things, aka labeling. And it's
Yeah.
just really cool to see like how it looks when I'm not on a bike, if that makes any
Hmm.
sense. And
Yeah.
passing through different corridors. And also, a learning curve for me is that I did not realize that pedestrian signals were not as um it's not a common thing, if that makes any sense. I don't see them as much as I
Yeah.
thought I would.
Right.
And I think that we probably need more at certain intersections, given like the traffic that goes through those corridors. But yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's pretty straightforward. At first I was a little confused with labeling because I was only seeing like folks label like one curb ramp, but not The one that's like adjacent, that's connecting a crosswalk. So I would get a little confused, but I'm better abreast at what's going on now. So I appreciate the trainings also help.
Awesome. Good to hear. And, I think that pedestrian signal issue is the city's reading it loud and clear. There was a lawsuit a few years ago about that. And, they kind of, I remember some figure about like 99% of signals in the city are not accessible. So uh, definitely an issue, but in good to have, right, this data that then can further kind of support where are the needs for those, where should those be prioritized. Great. And how about so William and Alan are in Naperville and Villa Park. Great. And Rashidat, which community are you coming with? I'm not sure. I hope I'm saying your name right, but is it Rashidat?
Yes, it is. I'm from Golden Gate.
Golden Gate. Okay.
Yes, with Miss Lucas.
Great.
Great. And I think Miss Lucas, she was on here for a moment, but she might be having some internet issues, so we might see her a little later.
Okay. Well, great. Glad to know where we're going to be looking at and who's here today. And why don't I just move forward? One of the things that we emphasized in our initial training and that we'll repeat here is the importance of accuracy. And part of the reason we focus on accuracy is that accurate data, right, is important for having stronger advocacy. We want to be able to eventually use this data for all kinds of different purposes. A lot of people, though, would like to use it for advocacy, right? And to be able to do that, it's really valuable to be able to share that the data is accurate. And so that way it's more likely to be trusted by local city officials as well as community members with and without disabilities. So the way that Project Sidewalk kind of approaches accuracy is one through the trainings that we do. We kind of gotta go above and beyond just saying, here's a website, go at it, right? We have these kind of formal trainings. And then we also you have a quality checking approach called validations. And validations are the second type of mission that you can do on Project Sidewalk. And they then are used to help quantify the accuracy of each rating and are also a way to help you learn how you can improve your accuracy. So let's go into how that works. One of the ways that you can review your own accuracy is on your dashboard. So this is if you go to projectsidewalk.org and sign in, and then in the top right corner, if you go to your dashboard, right under your name, there's like a little drop down. And so if you click on that, and thanks Maggie for putting in the link. When you click on that, you'll see a snapshot of your numbers. So, it's really a cool way to kind of keep track of everything you've done. And you'll see the number of missions you have, how far you've gone, the number of labels you've placed, if you've done some validations. I'm not sure if anyone started that yet. And then your accuracy. And your accuracy is calculated based on how many people have agreed with the labels you've placed. So accuracy is also, we don't have, kind of a machine or AI calculating and correcting the labels, but we do have other people. And so those other people are helping to confirm that, here is a curb ramp. What we're seeing in the image is labeled appropriately as a curb ramp, or this is appropriately labeled as an obstacle. And then you do get different badges depending on the number of missions and distances, etc. Is everyone able to find their dashboard?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
able, and I have a question. And since
Sure.
you mentioned it, AI, because as a disabled person and also I'm a wheelchair user, so I was going to say this is a great app also for me to also learn about more about curb ramps that because I always wanted to know like why, especially why they got a tactile on the curb ramps. And when I was going through and learning with Damien, I said, "Oh, I see why," and he was telling me like this is why that. But with the AI, um, I see the con with it because I see the oversight as it not being a human. Also, that it will oversight some things that the human eye would catch, but also um, the use of it being good because sometimes what we don't see or we are validating wrong as saying, "Oh,
Right.
this is that." They can validate, say, "No, don't you see this?" And then we can go back and look and go, "Oh, yes, we can see."
Yeah.
Will be an AI feature or like we are used like a drone or somewhat like AI in the future with the project?
Yeah, we definitely have part of our, so like half of our team is here at University of Illinois at Chicago and half is in the University of Washington, in the computer science department. And in that department is definitely, working to think about different ways that AI could be kind of integrated into the workflow of this project, both from like just kind of automatically labeling something and then, the human would be involved with like correcting it, or like you're saying, maybe the other way of like a human um, starting off and the AI validating. So they're playing around with some of those different options. One of the things they find, even with like when the data is really good, that AI is still not that great with certain types of features. Like it's very good at like it can detect like the curb ramp detectable warning, but it's not good at getting to the nuances of a broken or steep curb ramp, as well as like broken sidewalks and things like that. So it's definitely in the works and in the plans. And the team at University of Washington, I can share their website if you're kind of interested in reading a little bit more. John Froelich is the uh, principal investigator of that lab, and it's called Makeability Lab. They do a lot of cool engineering stuff, computer vision stuff, and so some of the papers that they've worked on for like using AI and machine learning, um, for helping to automate some of this stuff is on there. Thanks for that question. And then let's see, the other thing I wanted to share, remember if I don't know if we get Anna has a screenshot of this, but why don't I'll share. Do you see the Project Sidewalk website now? Yeah. Okay, so this was what we were showing before. These are all the, labels. When you go to your dashboard, you'll see a map of all the labels you placed, right? Which is pretty cool. And then when you scroll down, um, one of the important pieces as a next step is looking at how other people have validated your work. So if you've gotten any validations, what you'll see is for each type of feature, you'll see the feature and what others have uh, written in terms of their disagreements. So you see below are labels that have been marked as incorrect by other Project Sidewalk users. Now, this comes with a warning, right? Because there could be people who have done validations that are not correct. So, we do want you to use your knowledge of our initial training, but at the same time, this could be a great way as you're starting out to receive feedback that kind of connects. So here, what you'll see is the image of the feature, and then below it, if there's any comments that the validator provided. So here's another example of that. And in this case, part of the reason that I was um, maybe somebody validated me as incorrect is that this is an alley. Unfortunately, I can't move the image around like you can in some of our other views, but I think part of the issue is that this is an alley, so there's some different context there. Yeah, Damien.
What you were saying. I
Yeah.
actually validated both of these.
Oh, okay.
So this was the first one was a challenge, and I left a feedback question around the premise of this is construction, so it should probably be labeled as a construction. And then in the feedback, I put
Hmm.
that or I asked a question along the lines of when you go back to look at some of these how can I say this? When you go back to look at some of the maps, like maybe 6 months from now, because they update pretty regularly. Like if you look at the bottom in the far left-hand corner next to Google, it normally tells you when that last street was updated. So it'll say like
Yeah.
2019, 2025, 2024 are the years I see popping up mostly.
Yeah.
So my question is, um, does those things change? Have you also witnessed like certain mappings or labelings change because of certain things like construction? Um, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely, when we've kind of done some projects to kind of look at where we did a project that kind of compared data from Project Sidewalk with data that a city had collected. And we definitely saw some differences there related to like what you're saying with construction. Um, as you know, like sidewalk repairs and construction don't happen that often. Um, so, we don't anticipate that there would be much differences, but we are kind of coming up with a help document that would be about once you're done collecting your data, how could you go in and potentially look at some of the labels that are from images that are a little bit older? This is related to a community that we're working with that has kind of older data, older imagery. So one of the suburbs that maybe has older imagery. And so, one of the things we're doing is kind of pinpointing those and trying to see if we can use other imagery, like aerial imagery, to say, does it look like this image that anything happened with this curb ramp, even though, the image that we collected it from was from 2011. It's obviously very old, but if nothing happened, we can't see still any detectable warning there, then we, could make a reasonable assumption that that curb ramp hasn't been fixed yet. Um,
You
and so
highlight.
then,
Oh,
oh
sorry.
yeah, question?
Just a question about, so when you're looking at when other people said, I don't agree with your
Yeah.
labeling. And then so if you don't agree with their validation comments, or you feel like, you know, like, is there a way to flag that, or is it kind of like that?
I know that is a issue that Damien, I know you've been active on our Slack channel, which is great. That's definitely a feature that has been requested.
Yeah.
Um, and so what happens is whenever people like mention something like that, our developers kind of put it as like a ticket on what they call GitHub, which is like a repository for all the information about Project Sidewalk, and it actually has all the code for Project Sidewalk. Like if you were someone who wanted to like redo Project Sidewalk, this is the link that I put in the chat. But I'm pretty sure this is one of the things that has been asked for by other people. And so, partly the team tries to prioritize different issues or different updates. Like there's always every week we give the team kind of something new to try to update on, like the validation, like the customized validations weren't working before, I think, and so we kind of brought that issue up. So that was kind of a priority ticket, but yeah, no, I'll definitely mention it again. So, because I could also see it being relevant for like your own individual accuracy and whether you agree with that.
Yeah, I think that came
Because
up
like in
at the
this
last
case, I think
meeting.
I'm showing an image of, this, I would still call this a curb ramp, even though it might not have like what someone would think of as an official detectable warning. And that is an issue that a lot of newer raters have, is that they'll mark a curb ramp that doesn't have a detectable warning as a missing curb ramp, or and do like this, like, but that's not really appropriate. Yeah. And I guess this one too, someone has said that this is not an obstacle, but I would argue that it is. So, there are some issues like that, but not that many, given that I've done a lot of auditing and I guess this one is probably me making a mistake. If you're doing it a lot, I put a crosswalk by mistake on a curb ramp. Those are for sure the kind of things that we want to.
I get the mistake of the missing curb ramp being put in the middle of a sidewalk landing where like
Okay.
so like when you're in the middle of a long block, and normally like a residential block, there's sidewalks that have these little like dip offs from the actual main sidewalk, and they come to
Yeah.
the curb, but they're not made for accommodating folks who have wheelchairs. They're just not. But I see
Okay.
that as a common mistake too, where people are putting missing curb ramp there.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I also see another common mistake is the signal or the obstacle. Sometimes it's put on like the pole that we just seen there, which is actually questionable. That pole is actually blocking a big chunk of the sidewalk space, right?
Right. I
So
would agree. Yeah.
yeah, I normally for that particularly because that's not common either. The way that that pole is just like put in the middle of the sidewalk like that,
Right.
that's not common. So that's not a common thing. But yeah, sometimes those mistakes happen.
Yeah.
I've totally made mistakes when I first started off. I think I'm an expert now, so.
All right. Well, then you might be ready for validations, which I'll kind of introduce to you now as well. Awesome. Um, okay, so what are validations? Um,
What would constitute the actual curb ramp?
what would be a curb ramp? Example of a curb ramp?
Yes.
Um, let's see, I think I have some examples in my slideshow here that I could show you. Um, but a curb ramp is when you get to an intersection and where the sidewalk leads into the street, right? And so instead of having a step, just there's a ramp, or the grade of the sidewalk lowers down to the street. Yeah. Let's see, I guess if I share, we could look, probably this was
Also,
an
for the
example.
feedback parts, will we ever get any feedback back from the feedback we shared?
No, we don't have a way to do that, but that'd be a neat, maybe that's where AI could help.
I don't mind having a conversation in Slack also.
Yes, yes, yeah. I would definitely say, one of the things we encourage new raters to do is like take a screenshot of what you're doing and put it into Slack, and then we have over 200 people on there. People, love to give feedback about how if it there's nuances, right, in places where it's really hard to tell. Oh, is this a curb ramp or a missing curb ramp, or do you think this is an obstacle or not? So yeah, definitely do that. And then Rashidat, if you're on the website and you go to gallery, this is kind of a quick way to look at curb ramps. You can filter label types, and curb ramps. So these are lots of examples of curb ramps. You can see here it's where the sidewalk kind of goes into the street, and it's this feature right here at the corners that is what is considered a curb ramp. One of my children is printing something right now. This might be a little loud. Okay, and then let's see.
Yeah.
We have, so the two primary missions we mentioned are exploring and then validating labels. So this is what the validation mission will look like. There's these usually graphical drawings that kind of try to explain about doing these validations and what you should mark as agree or disagree. And you can kind of click through. You see there's 4 examples for this obstacle label. And then it says here, obstacles are barriers that impede the pedestrian pathway. So they are poles, fire hydrants, different kind of things that are in the middle of a sidewalk. We also suggest for people to label temporary things that are in the sidewalk, including cars and trash cans. Part of this is that, you know, even though they're temporary, they are there, right? And they do cause issues for a certain amount of time each week, or depending on how people continuously park there, right? So that's an important thing to distinguish as well. So this is what the validation interface looks like. And I know, Damien, you kind of mentioned, you know, looking at the severity of how someone rated it. In this case, what we're wanting you to focus on is whether you agree with the question on top of, is this an obstacle? And we may also, so for each feature, it'll just kind of change the question, but you might say, is this a curb ramp? And so partly it's just focused on the label itself and not necessarily the severity. We are working on what we call, right now it's called validate or admin validate beta. And it's a way for people who are more experienced to go in and actually correct the severity and tags of the labels. So that's something that we could definitely kind of introduce to folks as maybe a
I think that's
further
super
training.
important. The severities is something else that I noticed also is like
Okay.
um I would like sometimes I would like to actually like help folks with the severity. So I just, leave the comment at the bottom. I
Yeah,
hope that they
right.
can see it. I'm just like, hey, I make this. I always say suggesting that this should be labeled as this, and maybe the severity should be raised to this. And normally I give a reason why I chose that so that people
Great.
understand. And also, fun fact, I am an educator, so that's why I
Okay.
always that's because I know people are probably like, did this man just leave me a paragraph? And I'm just like,
That's awesome.
I'm just like super vested in people understanding why I did not agree with them on something. Or
That's
even if I
great.
why I agreed on something as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. This is all, you know, what's kind of neat is this is a learning community, and we're really trying to invite community members from wherever you are to learn with us and to learn from each other. So thanks, Maggie, for keeping up on the chat.
Uh,
Um,
I
and
saw, I
so
don't know if you saw in the chat, Alan was wondering if labels are validated by multiple people or if it's just one person.
yes, so that's the other thing is labels do get validated by multiple people. There's an algorithm for kind of what gets put as a priority for validation missions. And I think it often has to do with labels that have not been validated yet, and then labels that are labeled incorrectly. So, yes, so if, your team has multiple people and they're doing validation missions, you could get different agreements. And so like if I go back to this, let me see if we have one, but you could see in this case, there's like in the gallery, there's these little thumbs up and thumbs down. So you could see how many people have agreed or disagreed. In this case, there's 2 agreements. Here there's 3 agreements. So yeah, it's kind of how that works. And then yeah, so for this example here, if you were, your choices would be to be either agree, disagree, or not sure. So what do people think? Is this an obstacle? Would you agree, disagree, or are you unsure? You can put it in the chat if you'd
I'm
like, or
gonna
unmute.
vote that this is not an obstacle.
Okay. How about others?
I mean, the
I'm
depth
gonna vote
perception is
it's
kind of, sorry.
Go
The
ahead.
depth perception is kind of hard from this perspective, but I think you could probably get around it. It looks like it's most of a sidewalk square clear.
Yeah.
no, it's the obstacle.
Yeah,
Okay, you think it's obstacle, Quincy and Dolores?
yes, I think it's an obstacle.
Oh.
It's in the way.
Yeah.
It's a good safety measure to keep the accidents from running into the sidewalk and fence. But overall, I think it is an obstacle.
Yeah. And this is one where when you're in, it's a little hard right now because I'm just showing a screenshot of it. But when you're in Project Sidewalk, you can move around, right? So like right now, we're not really able to see the we're not able to see the context of it to maybe get a different angle, right? If you could get a different angle, you might be able to kind of come over here and look at how much space there is, and whether it's that this flower pot is going into the walkway, these 2 squares here, or as Alan said, maybe it's not. Yeah, Quincy.
My reasoning is two factors. If you can manipulate the area like you just said and move around, you can see that there's probably ample amount of space. My observation is based on wheelchairs being able to move gracefully down the sidewalk. And so, from my observation, this beautiful planter, concrete planter, is absolutely not an obstacle for a wheelchair or a stroller or a person in a walker or a walking stick to come past. And that's just my observation.
And then it's in the direct walking path as well.
Yeah, and that's what we're saying. It's a little bit hard to tell, right? Like how much it's in the walking path. But yeah, I mean, I think these are great, discussions of the nuance a little bit.
I just
Quincy, do you
want
want to say something?
Yes, I just want to add because as a wheelchair user, and I'm looking at this from a wheelchair point and lived experience, and these are like in the Columbus, especially, we have walkways like this, and like Damien said, as a person in a wheelchair, I can maneuver, but then that's the pro. The con is if this is a busy street way where people are walking back, this will be an obstacle for me because people will not move out the way for me to maneuver around it, and pedestrians will try to take the right of way of I gotta walk and we gotta move, and there's gonna be some type of collide there, and not enough space for me to maneuver and for them to have the walkway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely probably not enough room for two people to go across each other, especially if one of them is using a wheelchair.
I was
Yep.
gonna make my sidewalk joke, Quincy. I lived in New York also for a short period of time in my life, and that's the only place in America where people walk on the right side of the sidewalk, literally. And if you are in the way, they will let you know. They will be like, you are not walking in the direction of traffic. So, like, it's funny that you bring that up, that we have this as a nationwide problem where if a sidewalk or pedestrian walkway gets super busy, sometimes people are just not nice or cognizant of the other folks who may have like physical or mobility disabilities and stuff like that. So that was a good observation, Quincy.
Yeah, yeah. So here's another example. Is this an obstacle? Guys, put in the chat or unmute. Do you agree or disagree? There's an arrow pointing to street light there. Damien says yes. How about others? All right, we'll go with Damien's perspective. Yes, I think there's really little room for anyone with or without a disability to get around there. So here you would mark out and click on agree when you're doing this validation mission and seeing this obstacle. And one of the things you'll notice too that I'll highlight is on the side here, there's all these examples of when you should agree or disagree with some of the what you're looking at. So do look. So that's one of the neat things about the way that this website was designed by human-computer interaction designers to really help you along the way. Say, oh, I kind of forgot whether this should be an obstacle or not. So those can be really helpful. All right, glad to hear that, Damien likes the sidebar guidelines. Okay, how about this one? Is this a curb ramp?
Nope. And this is one of those examples that I run into when I'm validating that sometimes this is put as not a curb ramp, and then sometimes
Okay.
people put that as a curb ramp. So it goes in either direction.
Yeah. How about others? Anyone have a perspective on this one? Dolores, nope, it's a driveway apron. Yeah, exactly. This is
If you want to be technical, it's not a curb up because you don't have the tactile or that and a real life experience. Because I was telling Damien, like, I wonder in the product, do they have people in wheelchairs or that are blind that's going with somebody like down the street with them to say, this is in real life. No, this is not it because in Columbus, this will be considered if you want to do that, they'll put a curb way down because one, it looks like a driveway. Two, if you want to if this is a legit street that you want a car run to be on, and people with disabilities, blind, deaf, or in a wheelchair to have a proper way to stop or to know that's the end of the sidewalk, and that's a street, a street or alley, whatever, that they'll put something there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Right. So I think we would all agree. We disagree on that one. Here's another one. This is from Mexico City. Is this a missing curb ramp?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. This one's kind of pretty clear, right? There's no ramp coming down from the sidewalk. There's also a lot of stairs, which are also a barrier in themselves. But at the corner, there's definitely no curb ramp. Yeah, steps, which in areas that have more elevation changes, you find sometimes. Luckily, in Chicago, we don't have that as much of a problem.
That's
Yeah, Rashida, did you want to share?
It's kind of odd to have steps right there at the corner where it should be leveled off.
Yeah, definitely.
It's kind of
Definitely.
confusing.
So stairs are a big issue in cities that have those elevation changes. And we have found in some suburbs around Chicago that there are some steps still. So yeah, definitely an issue. So it seems like we'd all agree there. How about this one? This is a common one we find. Is this a missing curb ramp?
It needs a curb ramp.
Say that one more time. Were you saying that it should be a curb ramp?
Yes, it should be a curb ramp.
In a
Yeah,
perfect
so
in a perfect world, I would totally put a curb ramp there.
yeah. Right. And so the issue here is, as people put in the chat, this is like a residential walk of just someone's house and not necessarily part of the pedestrian network that someone would use to cross the street. We would, technically, have to look, we'd want to like, when we're in our validation mission, you can use the Google Street View panning to look across the street, right? Um, but here we can't, and so we might make an assumption, this is a residential walkway that is designed for people to go from their car to their house.
Wouldn't it be useful though, since it is residential?
Yeah,
Well,
it definitely would be useful. I agree. I think part of the issue is that the city, isn't required to this. Yeah, the city isn't required to make that a curb ramp to make that accessible because it is a private walk. Yeah, so it's part of the tricky part. I think, we're also our conversation has gotten into, what would go beyond what's required, right? To make things even better and easier for everyone.
it's, um, my thought was it being a residential street, it could be somebody that's either in that house or another house that's close by that needs a ramp because they have a
Right.
wheelchair, and then
Yeah.
going back and forth from transportation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I agree. I think in this case what we've tried to do is kind of hit on, you know, the parts that we know are required of cities, but it could be something that you might make a note of separately, and kind of share that with your city officials if that's important to you. So in this case, we're disagreeing. How about this one? Is this a surface problem? You see where the little orange dot is? So we have some yeses. This one's kind
Yes,
of pretty clear, right? And you can see how, when you look at some of these, you can kind of do them pretty quickly when it's so obvious like this. There's a question, is there a way to validate in the area of your choosing? So definitely yes. That was one of the features that just got fixed by our team. And did we share the Google Drive folder with everyone?
We did at the last training. I'll send it out again to this group.
Great.
So that
Yeah. And I can let me see if I can put it in the chat here.
Great.
So we created, Kiana did a great job of creating customized links for everyone's community. So if this works, it should take you to a page that has the name of your community and then a customized link um, to your community. And that way, because we do have so many areas around Chicagoland, that if, yeah, you want to kind of focus your efforts in your community, this would be the way to do it. Great, great question. Um, and then how about this one? Is this an obstacle? the last one. Oh, John is asking about, is there a way to validate even more specific within a neighborhood besides the links that we sent? Not exactly. Besides, if you do go on label map, so just jump from the presentation back to Project Sidewalk website. If you go to tools and label map, let's go. Let's see, which one is this? This is Addison. So if we go in and like we know that we wanted to label a street within a neighborhood, right? We could zoom in to that street. And then when you click on these, you're also given free or say unsure and leave comments. Is that kind of what you were thinking of, John? Yeah, okay. Okay, so this last one, in this case, we kind of point out in our training that this is a pole, but the pole is not necessarily in the walkway. There's a lot of area right around here that someone could get around that.
That's a funky intersection though.
Yeah, why do you say that?
Um, so it's funky to me because where the curb ramps are, they're not separated like you normally would see. It's all one like huge curb ramp. And it almost makes me feel like this is an intersection like the one we have downtown on State Street that does all crosswalks crossing at one time. Like there should be like a middle pedestrian crosswalk thing in the middle. But it just looks funky because of the way the light poles are also. Like
Uh-huh.
the light poles and the curb ramp, how it's just one big curb ramp. Yeah.
Yeah. And these are ones where, if you were marking it, one of the tags that we have for curb ramps is called it curb ramp points into the street. So you will see these, and these are, I think if I'm right with the history that, these kind of curb ramps were part of kind of previous design guidelines that were allowable, but they're not part of the newer guidelines, and they are really unsafe when someone in a wheelchair is traveling and the ramp sends somebody right into the street, and then they have to kind of jog back to the crosswalk, right? So nowadays, most of the curb ramps are intended to kind of go in the direction of travel. Okay, so this is the helpful note. I guess we already went over this. Giving. So in order to help others who are on your teams, part of your role is both to validate their work and then give the qualitative feedback about how they can improve. So when you disagree, share something about why you disagree. It's maybe because, saying that obstacle, there is enough room to get around that obstacle, or this is a driveway, it doesn't need a curb ramp label. So I'm trying to remember if, let's see, I had I actually have a list of standardized comments that I will make a copy of and put in the reference folder. Okay, let's see, is that in there? Yeah, okay. So, let's see, anyone with a link can view. Okay, so I'll put it in the chat. So let me know if you can access this. But what could be nice here is that you can use this feedback and kind of copy and paste it, so you have kind of a standardized way of and here's kind of what that looks like. It's a Google Doc, so you could kind of copy and paste this feedback into the validation missions when you disagree with someone, right? So you see some of these are, there's no curb ramp here, but there should be. Next time, use the missing curb ramp label. So we have one for each kind of feature. Okay, let's see what else we have. More about your validation feedback. We also have some slides on data visualization. So when you, at any point really, you can kind of look at what data you have in your community collected and think about ways of making maps using that data. These are maps and images could be really effective ways of telling your story about what needs to be improved, where it needs to be improved, and how bad it is. Along with, right, I think it's always helpful to show where things are good. There are curb ramps and sidewalks out there, and it can't hurt to also share those. In our research, what we generally found is that like a half to a little bit more than a half of the infrastructure that communities have audited is inaccessible. But that does mean that half of it is accessible. So, to kind of help, I think, develop good relationships, I think it's also important for cities to be able to see that and see where they are doing it. So Project Sidewalk can provide these images and map data to help you tell a story and identify those needed improvements. The main tool for that is Label Map. And this is a map right now showing all of Chicago and the surrounding areas, but you can zoom into your specific area and just show that area when you're doing your work. The tools that are available on Label Map are zooming in and out into neighborhoods, and then using filters to turn on and off labels and to look at the severity of labels. So what we're showing here is now the same map that had, all this data here, which is really hard to see for a map as a whole, but then just looking at two kinds of labels, obstacles and surface problems, which, typically happen in the middle of the block, right? And so everything else has been unchecked, and we're also filtering the severity to just choose the ones that are 3 to 5, which we could say are, likely the ones that people feel more confident in when they're doing their ratings, that those are really problems. So that's one way to kind of filter down. Another, useful tool for developing slideshows or using the data is the Project Sidewalk Gallery, where you can, hone in and do some neat stuff with, capturing imagery, right? You can easily go online and capture a missing curb ramp, right? And see what that looks like, but you can't do that for your own community necessarily or where you want to be looking at. So what's neat is that you now have a whole gallery of images, right? You didn't send anybody out. Everyone was just kind of sitting or standing near their desk capturing this data, but you have all this imagery that points to all different kinds of features and those that are good and those that have problems. So the Sidewalk Gallery is a nice tool for that. And we do, yeah.
I just want to add, Kiana made a list of all of your communities and a special code for all of your communities for the gallery. So you can say, oh, like I just want to see the curb ramps in the South Shore or in Villa Park. So it's not all of Chicagoland. So that's in that Google folder that will make sure.
Yeah, and I can put that here. I have it open. Here's the link for that as well. Yeah, so you can definitely, look at that. That's another way to kind of also do validation missions kind of quickly. And then lastly, on the Project Sidewalk website, one of the little tabs on top is the API. And this is allows you to do a little bit more with your data because you can download it directly. And if you're comfortable working with data, you can use it in Excel, or you can use it in a mapping software as well. So we are developing some help guides for that, for people to be able to do some kind of graphs and charts with your data, as well as some maps in some software outside of Project Sidewalk. So be on the lookout for that when we share those. We have several different community examples of how people have used the data. One is from Newberg, Oregon. This was kind of a smaller city in Oregon. They did have a lot of users, so they gathered a lot of over 200 users to participate in the community mapping and did 116 miles of sidewalk, of street. And as a result, the city council established a new sidewalk renovation program and allocated $50,000 for immediate repairs on city property. Ward 40 here in Chicago is another example we like to show, where they had a safe streets committee that worked on auditing in their ward, and they used this data to identify and prioritize investments for the wards. For those working in Chicago, each alderman has an infrastructure budget of 1.5 million that they sometimes work with the community, sometimes don't, but they prioritize infrastructure improvements that the Chicago Department of Transportation may not be able to get to in that year. So this is a little bit about, and that's called menu funds. We're working in St. Louis as well. These are some visualizations. So these are when you take the software, when you take the data outside of Project Sidewalk, you could do a little bit more with the design and coloring of these maps. So here we're showing the area that's been audited in St. Louis and all the labels that have been placed. And then what you could do is also create series of maps. In this case, kind of showing them separately, right, and side by side. So we could see, maybe that looks like there's certain clusters of missing curb ramps in some neighborhoods. And maybe there's certain blocks with like lots of obstacles, right? So by doing these kind of separate maps, we're also able to kind of hone in on certain patterns that are problematic. In this case, then we've further refined it to features that are higher severity, rated as 4s and 5s. And then this is kind of zooming in to, maybe looking at those all together. Sometimes you want to look at all the labels together, sometimes you don't. In other softwares, when you bring in the data, you can also provide some additional context, such as looking at areas around schools or hospitals or transit stops that might help the government officials that you're working with and build on your advocacy efforts. This is another kind of slide that we made that shows examples of each type of feature and what a severity 1 versus a severity 5 might look like. And that can help to visualize the problems, right? And can be a nice way to educate your city officials. And then, it can be helpful to kind of identify ongoing trends like Damien had started to do. In this case, in St. Louis, they identified that there were a lot of surface problems. There were a lot of streets with no sidewalks, and there were a lot of curb ramps that were angled into the street. Oh, change.
Can you hear me now? Yep. So there's a lot of curb ramps that were angled into the street. So there may be certain patterns of features that are unique to your community. And what's really neat is that by you doing this and by being able to look at the data in different ways, you're able to identify some of those trends and patterns that you can advocate for changing. Um, we have another set of slides, but I think maybe I'll stop here since we just have a few minutes just to see um, maybe what other questions you guys might have with either labeling or validating.
Um, yeah, I was wondering, if how would you typically deal with temporary construction, or snow kind of stuff?
Yeah, good
But
question. Yeah, we generally give the guidance that you could put that as an obstacle,
mm,
um, or mark it like if you're marking a curb ramp that might have construction that you might mark it with a higher severity. Just because we kind of know that sometimes construction lasts very long, and
mm,
and then also a lot of times the places that get constructed, like they don't put them back necessarily. They just kind of put like asphalt on them and it's all bumpy. So it's just kind of a flag then for someone to go back and look at it, right?
mm, yeah,
Is how we've approached it.
cool. Cool. What about snow and stuff like that? That's a seasonal thing.
Yeah, snow, depending on how much you can see, we might put the can't see uh the feature as an issue,
Mm,
or yeah, putting that as an obstacle could also be an issue. And I know in the city of Chicago, they're working on like a plow the sidewalks campaign.
mm,
Um, and they're trying to get an ordinance passed to have the city take more responsibility for that. So,
mm,
I think that could be flagging that could be a good way to kind of show how much of a problem it is if that's, part of advocacy efforts.
mm. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else have any questions about what we've covered today or things we covered last time? Yeah, Alan?
I have kind of a question more about long term. Like once we as a community have mapped out our all of our sidewalks and we have gone through like the validation process and we're happy with the data that we have, we plan to present this to like people in our local government. Um, and I can already tell that like their immediate response to that is going to be, oh, this is Google Maps data that is 5 years old. It's not valid anymore.
Yeah.
Does Project Sidewalk have recommendations for like how we can, like once spring rolls around and the weather's nicer, we can go out there and like,
Yeah.
validate some of these things with like current photos?
Yeah. And that's we've run up against that with a few of the wards in Chicago who, I think the data was from 2022 and they were like, no, that's too old. But it was like 2023, so it was like a year old. And
Yeah.
so what we did for them was like we just we filtered the kind of more problematic issues and then we went out and took pictures and sent those along with them. And they ended up working on them and putting them on their list of
Mm,
things that were priorities. So I think it does help. And that could be another another help document that we add. I think I mentioned too, one of the things you could do is, you know, simply use aerials are often more up to date. So, if let's say you're looking at data and it's from 2015, but then, you go and look at an aerial and it doesn't look like anything changed, you could have some stronger confidence. So I think partly a first step is, narrowing down your data to what you would like to advocate for as a priority, and then thinking about how you can provide some defense to any of those kind of claims. One, by looking at aerial imagery, if that's more pretty recent, and two, by going out to those sites. And I think in Ward 40 they did that as well, especially because they were, going to be using funds right away. So yeah, I think having some volunteers to go out and do some verification pictures can be very helpful.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. And maybe that's a series of steps, filter the data, look on Google aerial imagery, and then go in person too, if that's kind of what the city needs. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts? Or does anyone have questions on, like, how do I move forward? Or if
Off
you're
of what was just said, if there's a known issue in a place that has developed since say it's 2022, but in 2024 you know that there was an issue that got developed, but it's not visible in Street View, can
uh,
you plant it?
right. You could, if you kind of knew that something was there. People might disagree with you though on validation missions, right? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, partly
Unless you
what,
put it in the comments, like,
right.
hey, this is a 2025 issue, even though
Yeah.
Google Street View is out of date. I'm
Yeah.
working on updating Street View.
Right, right, yes. Yeah.
Because
Definitely.
if Street View updates, will it still match the overlay of what the labels are?
Um, I think so. Yeah, let me verify that, but I think
Hmm,
so. Um,
interesting.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, let me make a note to follow up. All right. Any other questions? Great. Well, one thing I encourage people to do is to, join the Slack channel. I know some of you have, and to ask questions there, along with emailing questions can be good. But hopefully these presentation and different documents we shared are useful. And then yeah, we're really interested in kind of seeing where you guys go with this project and with your teams. And we're planning to have additional calls um, over the spring to kind of find out where people are and to help people and to kind of share kind of successes and challenges. So I think Maggie will be following up about when those are and scheduling those.
Yeah,
Cool.
Kiana and I are just we're gonna get our schedules in line, and I'll follow up with dates, and I'll also follow up with an email with a lot of the resources we talked about today, and
Great.
some of the things that were shared in the chat. Um, and then you have my email, so you're always welcome to contact me. And going forward, like throughout the spring, if you're thinking about like how do I want to visualize this data, that's something we can be talking about because we want to help you advocate for your sidewalks and your bikeways in your community. So
Mhm.
that will be an ongoing conversation to see how we can support you guys.
Last question here. For example, Danville, Illinois, it's a community where there's almost more of an abundance of no sidewalks than there are sidewalks.
Yeah.
Um, how would you recommend the the sporadic placement of saying that there's not a sidewalk there,
Yeah.
if that's like a majority of cases, or should I just lean into that?
Yeah, we kind of suggest for folks, we've there's also, been recommendations to have like kind of line labels so that you could do like, just make a line label of there's a missing sidewalk on this whole block. Uh,
Mm,
that hasn't been implemented yet, so what we generally suggest for people is to every time you take a step in Google Street View to make a label. So like we're did a project in Mendota, Illinois, which is I don't know how similar that would be to Danville, but you can see there's a ton of missing sidewalks. So,
Oh man.
what the raiders there were trained to do is, each time they moved to, add these missing sidewalk labels, which then, clearly shows that the whole block, um, and I think that's where the differentiation is, right? Is like, is it the whole block or is it part of the block? Because what you see too in suburbs is like it being choppy, right? And like there's some parts that do and some parts that don't, depending on, the developer who started there.
Huh.
Yeah, so you can go to this too. It's in the other cities, Mendota, Illinois, if you want to take a look at that.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Um, at the same time, like if you were trying to be strategic and you wanted to focus on streets that don't have that do have sidewalks, right? You could, instead of letting the tool kind of place you into a location, you could so go back to sharing, sorry. Um
Build the route.
yeah, you can do the route builder to if you know which
Mm.
ones have it. Maybe you look on Google Earth or Google Maps first. Or you can, go on Label Map as well, and you can click on streets and click, this street to explore. Um,
Mm.
and that'll start you on a mission for just that street. So,
Mm.
if it's like, oh, there's 5 out of 100 streets that have sidewalks, maybe that's an approach. And then, you kind of in some other way kind of share much sidewalks, how many streets have no sidewalks at all.
Mm. Cool. I like it.
Cool. Well, great. These are great questions. And yeah, we'll try to follow up with any of the ones I hadn't answered and follow up with those additional resources, but excited for all your work.
Yeah, thank you, Yohai, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. And I'm glad we have this recorded since I forgot to do that last time. So we'll